You remember when we all expected gaming to get better in the future? Better graphics, better quests, better writing, better interactivity, larger worlds, better everything. Remember those days? Oh boy, that was a long time ago. Now we have mainstream gaming news articles celebrating mediocrity. Having little whoopers and hurrahs over removing features of making games blunder and less technically complex. God. We live in such an absurd clown world, we really do. I don't care about being able to kill everybody and steal the maze pants in RPG like Avowed, and I'm tired of pretending it's mandatory. Holy shit, it is actually the meme. It is literally the meme. Man, I can't wait for next-gen graphics. What? This is where we are now. Oh, Jesus. See, here's the thing. It's not mandatory. That's the point of having the option. That is the point of having the feature. If you don't want to kill everybody, if you don't want to steal the mayor's pants, you don't have to. That is not actually a key interactive gameplay experience right there, but you can do it if you so desire. Unless, of course, you make a game in 2020 goddamn 5 where you can't do basic stuff like that. Hell, we're not even talking about stuff like that. The NPCs don't even move. Avowed is missing features that were commonplace in RPGs from 2 decades ago. I mean, shit, randomly pathing NPCs is something we saw in the Super Nintendo days. Oh, God. This kind of is all around Avowed, right? Avowed is this strange game that is probably the single most astroturfed title I have ever seen. The big Avowed interview, Obsidian, and why full open world RPGs aren't always the answer. Ah, yes, indeed. It's not because you ran out of time or budget or were forced to push something out the door. No. You always intended to make a small, borderline unplayable, basic bitch experience that would have felt somewhat feature incomplete in 2002. Yes, that was always the aim. Even though the developers themselves, of course, mentioned that isn't actually what they were going for. But it turns out they didn't have the technical competence to do anything but. And yet, what was it here? What a difference a few weeks makes. It wasn't that long ago that question marks were still hanging over Obsidian's coral-colored role-playing game Avowed. Promotional trailers had left people unconvinced, showing an adventure that looked old-fashioned and lacking in originality. Yet weeks later, Avowed has wide acclaim. It is one of this year's most pleasant surprises. I wrote in our Avowed review. Motherfucker's quoting himself. Straight up. Oh yeah, no. Avowed has reached critical acclaim. I acclaimed it. Critically. Holy shit. I want to point out too, it hasn't gotten any better. This was still the peak for a game that was 6 years in development, with a crew of like 200 plus people. I don't think the critical acclaim is going to help it very much, to be honest, but let me actually just read this article to you. You don't have to be Skyrim to be good. Hell, that's true, although I will also point out that, unironically, basically nothing since Skyrim has actually topped Skyrim. As much stick as that game gets, frankly, a lot of the stick is undeserved. It's based on the idea of how things will become so much better, and yet, here we sit, and it really hasn't gotten much better. In fact, it has gotten observably worse in so many ways. There comes a time, dear reader, when us writers at PC Gamers are at odds, and I find myself on the other side of a fence shouting nonsense, balderdash, tomfoolery, and my unfortunate colleagues Joshua Wallens and Robert Zack, who have got it into their heads that Avowed is somehow lesser for its lack of reactivity, or most crucially, the inability to rob shopkeepers after you've paid them. You know, it's pretty rare for me to agree with the PC Gamer journalist, but yeah, no. A game is in fact lesser if it possesses fewer mechanics than its competition. In fact, Avowed is a game that has come under constant scrutiny for this simple fact, and to be fair, to its detractors, they are correct by technicality. Avowed is not a very reactive game. There's no real stealth system, there's no theft system, there's no bounty system, you can't kill everyone you come across, NPCs don't have daily routines. It is a world trapped in amber. To be fair to my detractors, they are correct in every critique they levy against the game. But you see, I have no standards whatsoever. So I just don't care. Oh, well, shit. I guess there isn't a whole lot of argument to be levied against that now, is there? Despite the fact that I've been denied these RPG staples as apparently necessary as bread and water, I've somehow yet managed to enjoy myself. Probably because you're unironically not a gamer. Straight up. This is something I've been noticing more and more recently. Specifically in Total War, for example, where you have fresh generations coming into long-established franchises, and they think that where they enter is the peak of gaming. If they enter into Oblivion, that's the best RPG ever. If they enter into Monster Hunter Wilds, that's the best thing ever. If they enter into Dark Souls 2, that's the best thing ever, and so on. They seem unaware of the rich history of the games that came before. Total War is my go-to example for this because I once made a video, and I think it's something like 13 minutes long. I don't know if it's still available. It's on the old Arch Warhammer channel, the lore one, back when I did variety content there as well, where I simply listed every single feature that had been removed from Total War games for like 20 minutes. Gaming has gotten worse. It's not rose-tinted glasses, it's not nostalgia, it's actually objectively gotten shitter. And it is people like this that has allowed that, the complete collapse of all basic standards. And that's because of how Avowed is an extremely focused game. Its narrow scope hones in on a few things. Combat, exploration, environment, and story, which are also subpar, mind you, but it's literally a horse with blinders on. You know, as a fun little fact, you know why they put blinders on horses? It is to narrow their field of view, not so that they can, see better straight ahead, because the horse's brain isn't like ours. If you narrow its field of view, that's all it thinks exists. It doesn't understand that everything else is still there. This is our video game journalist. If you force him to look through a pinhole, he will believe that to be the world in its entirety. Why? Because he's got the IQ of a servile animal. That's why. And you know what? It does all of those things well. I don't know about that either. Its story is maybe the weakest of It does all of these things well, except the story, which is garbage. Help me. But Harvey says a person I just made up, Skyrim had all of those things. You could kill a guy and steal his pants in Skyrim. You could murder a chicken farm in Skyrim. You could relentlessly follow some guy and find out what preordained task he's prone to do in Skyrim. And then also kill him and steal his pants. And murder his chickens. Why didn't Obsidian do a Skyrim? Are they stupid? Yes. Unironically, yes. They are stupid as in they are incompetent. Because all of that stuff, the combat, the story, the side quests, all of that was in Skyrim. It just had more stuff. And the excuse? No. Look at the issue with this train of thought is that it assumes that modern video games are dreams spun together with psychic brain magic, and not painfully tangles of code that barely function even after hundreds of people work very hard on them for far too many hours. Yes, from a consumer viewpoint, Avowed is a full-price game, so if your argument is that you wanted more bang for your buck, I can disagree with you, but not dismiss you entirely. Only you decide what is worth your time. Well, that's the thing. Skyrim, in all due likelihood, was made by a comparably sized team, if not indeed smaller, than Avowed. Avowed was being developed for 6 years by 200 people with access to vastly superior tools today. That's what people keep forgetting too. Oh, video gaming shouldn't be expected to get better. Don't you know how hard it is to make games? You mean slap together random assets in Unreal Engine? Yeah, sounds difficult to me. And don't get me wrong, of course it's hard. Of course it requires time and effort, but compared to the olden days, when they literally had to build these engines from pieces of scrap metal and barbed wire they had lying around in their fucking backyards, it is infinitely easier today to make a video game than then. And yet, we had more features when they needed to polish together the engine with spit and duct tape than we do now. And it is because of the lack of passion, of actual interest, of genuine want to make a good video game that does this. It is a competency crisis. The people who used to make video games because they enjoyed making video games, because they wanted to, and that made them in turn driven, innovative, and good at their jobs. These mother humpers can't be bothered to programming the ability to kill a chicken. Why? Because they really don't care. They too have their blinders on. But the implication that anyone who worked on this thing is simply thought, now we won't put a theft system in, there is boneheaded. Resources went elsewhere, and Obsidian Studios tend to have several irons in the fire at once. Again, simply not an excuse. There's also this underlying idea I find equally maddening, that if you make an RPG, it has to let you engage NPC stalking, pants-stealing, chicken murder. If it doesn't permit you to live your most Groundhog Day or butcher fancies, it is somehow a bad RPG, something that be cast out of the canon. I'm here to stand up and say, since bloody when? Since bloody ever? That's literally the point of a role-playing game. Now, certainly, there are role-playing games that focus on different things, but Avowed doesn't do anything well. It doesn't do story well. It doesn't do quest well. It doesn't do combat very well. It doesn't do graphics very well. It is, at the very best, mediocre in every single aspect and still offers less. Yes, RPGs with huge amounts of freedom are arguably the landmarks of the genre. They're the hardest to make sure, they're also the most enduring. Still, they're also not the only RPGs that exist, nor should they be. You couldn't go on murder hobo sprees in Knights of the Old Republic, or Mass Effect, or The Witcher 3. No one is saying that Final Fantasy VII is a lesser RPG because Cloud Strife couldn't pull out the Buster Sword and do a little purging for Shinra. Well, you could actually argue that it is compatible to modern standards, but these are also a little bit more older games as well. Old Republic, Mass Effect. Now, Witcher 3 is more recent, and you can kill quite a few people in that one. Can you kill civvies in that one? I haven't actually tried. But these games also do things that Avowed does not do. The Witcher 3 is like, if you're a completionist, 100 hours plus. Avowed is like 30. It's comparing apples to oranges in an incredibly disingenuous way as well. And you know what? I don't think I cared all that much in the first place. In games where murder sprees are possible, I found actually sticking to them to be eminently unsatisfying. Sure, there are the perks that are immersive, reactive template grunts, but are they required for me to have a good time? Not one bit. Literally, and that's the core argument here. I, as this lad right here, don't actually need to be playing a complex video game. It is enough for me to be granted a wheel to spin upon. And I will argue, in fact, that video games should regress rather than advance. this is also a very big part of the reason why, PC gaming magazines are not a thing anymore. We used to look up to games journalists. They used to be the people who we viewed as the ones fighting our cause, pushing our agenda towards developers, asking for better games, asking for less bugs, asking for more features, etc. They used to be our representatives who would then come back and show us a video game. Hey, look at this awesome things. We were like, wow, that looks so much cooler than the previous game. The graphics are better, we can do more stuff. This is an improvement. Now, those video game journalists come back to us and go, hold on there. You will accept less in your video games, and you will pay more for them as well. This, incidentally, is why I am not at all on board with the idea of Grand Theft Auto, the next one is at 6 now, costing $100, with the justification being like, oh, it's totally going to be an amazing game, it's totally going to be worth it. Who the hell knows that? Grand Theft Auto 6, I presume, could actually be objectively worse than the predecessor. In fact, if anything that current gaming has shown us, it is actually quite likely to be an inferior product. And we can't even lean on previous successes to say that it won't. Look at Bethesda and what it's done recently. The creators of some of the greatest RPGs ever gave us Starfield. I don't think anyone should be willing to accept increasing video game prices while simultaneously accepting less and less features. Particularly not the people who were, in theory, supposed to be fighting the good fight here. Although I will say this, on the average PC Gamer article, you've got something like 3 comments. And so this one's got 100. In all due likelihood, this utterly brain-damaged take has brought more traffic to their dead little website than any amount of other opinion pieces or reviews. So, perhaps this is simply just expertly crafted bait, but at the same time, I genuinely do believe that these people have blinders so thoroughly glued to their face that this is probably a genuinely held belief, much to the chagrin and sadness of everybody else. Hey. Do let me know what you think in the comment section down below, of course. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and remember, please, don't accept less for more. God help us all. Have a good day.